Come on. Okay, we're ready.
Oh,
Can we,
good beans.
I'm gonna slide it over where we're not getting you, but we can get Ron.
That's fine.
Unless you feel ready.
I'm good.
All right. Are we ready now? Or not quite yet, Ms. Lynn?
Yes, no.
Okay.
Do we have,
Hey guy, how you doing? Pretty good.
oh, we do have a light. All right. I will call us to order at 5:38 PM. And the flag is in the corner. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The Lord's flag of the state of Mexico,
See you soon.
the people who permit their friendship and welcome.
All right, this is Campbell on roll call.
Dr. Jumbo.
Here.
Mrs. Hunt Daly. Here. Mr. Jaramillo.
Here.
Mr. Ortiz.
Here.
Mrs. Lee.
Present, we do indeed have a quorum and adoption of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? If so, what? Superintendent Wagner.
Madam President, I do want to be mindful of our time tonight. So we want to get lots of work done, and I believe that the consensus among the board is that we would like to have the meeting finished about 8 o'clock.
Thank you.
I do recommend that we adopt the agenda for tonight.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. It has been moved by Ms. Hunt Daly and seconded by Mr. Jaramillo to approve the agenda as presented. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we shall proceed to a roll call vote. Mrs. Sandoval, please.
Dr. Jumbo.
Yes.
Mrs. Hunt Daly. Yes. Mr. Jaramillo.
Yes.
Mr. Ortiz.
Yes.
Mrs. Lee.
Aye, the motion carries. Before we get started on presentations, I would just like to clarify for the viewing audience that this is just a work session. There will be no action taken at the board meeting this evening. And we have several presentations and things that we are going to be talking about and addressing. And as Mr. Widener indicated, our hopes is to be out of here. I need to leave by 8 o'clock myself, so we're all hoping that maybe we can get through this in a timely manner. So, Mr. Widener.
Wonderful. Tonight we have presentations. We will be talking about important issues that affect you as a board, that affect our district. We have had lots of requests for conversations about some of these items, and so back in March, as a board, you tasked me with finding a mentor, somebody who would mentor me as the superintendent. I found a great mentor who is going to mentor me. She is mentoring directors, principals, assistant principals, and trying to help us really in shifting gears at Grant Cibola County Schools. She also held a work session for you all last January, and I asked her if she would be willing to come help us with some of our board meetings as well. And I know that not all of you met Mrs. Lightfoot in January, but I am very excited that we have Bonnie Lightfoot with us tonight. She's gonna start us off. We've had a request from Mrs. Hunt Daly that we talk about board authority, we talk about our budget. And so I've asked Mrs. Lightfoot if she would come talk about the board's responsibility in establishing the budget, as well as how we run the organization. So, Mrs. Lightfoot.
Sure, so thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. I just want to let you know I've spent a couple of days with the five folks at Grants County St. Louis Schools. It's been a really fun July, and we had a great time at the summit, and then I spent all day today driving around the county and finding schools, and I think I have 33 appointments scheduled for me. Reyes did a great job of putting a schedule for me together, and so I will have, I think it's 33 appointments together between this morning and my time departure on Friday, and it's just been a great eye-opening experience. I've had a climate survey I've asked them to kind of fill out and see about kind of where we are and where they stand. And so just want to let you know, I'm thrilled to be here. It's a fabulous place. I think I must have missed my calling not coming to Grants early on in my career. It's a great place. Thanks for being here. I think it's my understanding that work sessions is informal kind of discussion, so I didn't necessarily prepare a PowerPoint training session like I did before last time. I just want you to know I have pulled up the document I use at our training, which is your policy, right, based in state statute and administrative code. And so I have it pulled up on my laptop tonight if it needs to be something you'd like me to reference as you move forward. Or if I can help you keep time and whatever you need me to do, I'm here to help you do all of those things. Just the high points as just a reminder about board authority. I'm gonna remind you this is 3 pages long, and if you want to know the number of the document that I'm looking at, it's B as in boy -0200, and that is your policy. B as in boy -0200. And it's titled Board Powers and Responsibilities. And you'll remember when I came last time to talk to you, we compared that to superintendent responsibilities as well. There's a whole long list of bullet points, and I don't intend to talk to you that long because it's your work session. I'm just here to be a resource for you. Just a couple of the high points. Remember that you are subject to the rules of the Public Education Department and Secretary of Education. And your primary duties are to develop policies. That's the very first bullet point, is that you develop policies. The second thing is that you employ a superintendent. The third one, here's exactly the language: review and approve the school district budget. That's all. Review and approve the school district budget. Let me remind you that all of these are based upon state statutes. So these are not just your ideas for each other. What you want to do, these are actually based in law. Of course, you can acquire acquire, lease, and dispose of property. And you have the capacity to sue and be sued. And so in many workshops and trainings you guys have been to, they kind of get the high five. Those are the high five, right? There are a few underneath those about obligation bonds and maintenance and those kinds of things, salary, all that kind of stuff. Towards the bottom of the page, it does talk about adopting rules pertaining to the administration of the powers and duties of the local school board. So you have capacity to do different things about those rules. So I know you have, you had mentioned organizational charts, you've talked about budget. I know you have committees to do different approval of things. So some of those rules that you do, I know that that's some rules that you have adopted at your school site. The page 2, just as a reminder, these are based in administrative code. And so that's different than state statute. State statute is like the law, the administrative code is how to. It's like the policies versus the procedures part. And in here, it talks about the amount of hours and times that you need to be trained, and it's your responsibility to make sure that you train, that you get your people to trainings. And then it's pretty blunt about the administrative code about what you're supposed to do as a board. And one of the bullet points is to delegate administrative and supervisory functions to the local superintendent. And that's based on the state statute on page 1 where you hire them. And so that is your your prerogative, and you've hired well, and Mr. Widener, I'll let you know this, the information I received today and also through the survey is, he's doing the things that you want to be done in a district where kids are being put first. So you should hear that from someone from the outside, taking inside, opinions today, and I will share that with you later on. The second bullet point is to refrain from involvement in delegated administrative functions. So another word for that is to not be micromanagers, because your duties in terms of statute and codes is to hire someone and let them take the reins. And quite frankly, if you're not happy with the job that person's doing, then you have the right to terminate that person. That's honest to goodness truth, right? If they're not doing the job that you want them to do, then that person can be terminated. It doesn't say that means you micromanage what they're supposed to do. You delegate with your authority and responsibility, and then that becomes superintendent's job. Another high point is, of course, to review, revise as needed, and submit policies to PID as you feel appropriate. So I don't know exactly what it is that you need for me to discuss with you tonight. If there's any more specific than that, I wanted to hit what I thought might be the high points about what your work session is aimed at. Is that satisfactory target what you intended, or is there something else I can help with?
I think that is a great review, for us, as far as, what our lane is. Sorry, Mr. Wyman. But what our lane is that we should be staying in, and, what our responsibilities are. Board members, did you have any questions for Ms. Lightfoot regarding any type of board authority?
Well, I'll have this pulled up. If you change your mind for some reason, I'll have this pulled up in the back, and I'll just be available for you to do whatever you need to happen. But this again is your policy. And if you kept the training from what I did in January or March or whatever it was, there was a comparison between what your responsibilities and duties are, and then linked, of course, credentials, licensure, and its requirements to make sure every student is taken care of in this district. So there's a very high review. I can talk longer, talk faster, talk more. I just thought a high review is what you need to do. Okay, I'll be in the back.
I just have a quick question.
I'm sorry, you got a couple.
Well, I was just gonna ask, so if the superintendent, he has all the power to run the district. Can we, as a board or board members, sit down with them and ask you, why did you do this, or give us your spiel on why you want to go this route?
Can you as individuals is a different question than can you as a board?
As a board member, can I?
As a single board member?
Yes.
I don't think any superintendent would be unwilling to visit with any member of the board. I haven't spoken to him about that to know what his or your practices are. As a superintendent myself, I'd be willing to talk to any board member, of course. The difference then is that there's no authority when it's one board member, right? The difference, of course, is the board as a group has the power. Anybody is willing to answer questions. I would just caution that the questions needed to be asked, in my estimation, in a way of clarifying and not trying to micromanage.
Yeah, no.
But if you have a reason to wonder about something, I think every reason in the world to be asked is just, I would caution against delving into administrative duties that have been delegated to you. Does that answer your question?
Somewhat, because I'm the type of guy that likes to ask questions. And I've sat down with Lane a few times.
Well, the bottom line is you've been elected by your peers to represent the students in this district, and so you need to do that.
And those parents come, I get numerous calls
Sure.
on situations and things.
Well, I haven't been to a single one of your board meetings. This is my first little work session. I came to the thing last March. I don't know what you do. I don't know how it goes, right? I think that's part of the beauty of having me come, quite frankly, is I don't have any perceived notions about what is or isn't. I'm just bringing what I have experienced for the last 30 years in New Mexico education and the superintendent myself. And those of you guys who don't know all of the thing, I am currently also the executive director for the New Mexico REC Association. And I'm also the president of the New Mexico Coalition of Educational Leaders. And so I hope I could bring some knowledge and some experiences through that lens too, to what we're talking about. But if I can just offer one more thing, and I didn't mean to get if there was other questions, I didn't think there was body language telling me there was questions, so I was gonna let you hurry along. If you were gonna be a good board member and represent the people you were elected to do, like you just asked me about, part of that is you come prepared to the meeting, prepared, right? And so if you come prepared, if you don't come prepared to the meeting, if you haven't looked at your packet, if you haven't looked at the stuff, if you haven't asked questions of Lane ahead of time, perhaps, then what's gonna happen when you, I'm assuming other board would do this, then you come to this place and you're on a public forum and you're having a public meeting, and then you have questions, right? And then it turns into kind of a
And that's not what
lengthy time, but part of your question is being a good board member. And I think part of being a good board member is being prepared before you come to the meetings. I think board meetings that are derailed by questions that are lengthy or sometimes unproductive use of time.
Well, I'm not going to ask questions during the board meeting.
Yeah,
I'm asking if I can sit down
sure.
in his office or whatever.
I would advise Lane to be wise and to say yes.
That's what I'm.
Yes. Did someone else have a question? Oh, I'm sorry.
Ms. Daly?
Two questions. The manner in which we run our board meetings, according to policy, there's certain things that we have to follow from that's mandated by the Mexico Public Education. The manner in which we hold discussions leaves me a little confused at times. We make a motion to accept something, and then we have discussion. Now, I know we tried to use Robert Rule of Orders too, but when I went online looking at Robert, that hasn't been revamped for, I don't know how long. But the manner in which we do, so what good does it do to have discussion after we've already approved the motion? I would assume that we should discuss it first and then then take a vote on whether we, through the discussion, that we agree or disagree. The last board meeting, I made a motion, I can't remember, it was for SME, to do a contract or add a budget, what do they call them? They call them budget.
Consent agenda?
The consent agenda, and then they said, budget change. And then, so I voted nay because I didn't know why we were doing that, but we had already voted. And I voted nay with the assumption that I didn't know what that motion was about or what that request was about. But we had already voted on it, so my nay meant nothing. And so I don't know if it would be more productive if we had the discussion first and then voted on it. And I know that's kind of up to us, because the PAD doesn't dictate on how we actually run the meeting. And as long as I've been on the board since 2013, we've always used Robert Rule of Orders. But I know now it's really old and outdated, and there is actually nothing new about it. Okay, that's my first concern. The second one is, if we feel as a board member that we're not getting pertinent information, even though we have that on our agenda, then whether or not we approve it or not could be, I think, could be postponed until we were clear of the information that request or that motion is asking for. Because like with the consent agenda, it's a bunch of things and we don't want to, before, when I first got on the board, we used to go through the line items. We had a president who was very adamant about looking at the budget, it's called a bar. We're trying to read the agenda. And he used to go through all the pages of the finance. And but it got to be really lengthy. And so I think it was when Guy came on. we decided that we were going to utilize a consent agenda where we didn't have to go through each line item. But there are themes that in the consent agenda that we look at too, that kind of bother or go back with something that we've already decided we're not going to do. But we're still paying the contractor. And especially if the amount is 300 some thousand, we want to make sure that, you know, we decided we didn't want to do business with that company because they weren't fulfilling supposed to do. But then we're still paying expenditures for it. So I had motion at one time or suggested that we maybe not utilize the consent agenda when there's just a few minor things that we have to look at. You know, I know about payroll and stuff like that, that's part of the request. But things like contractors and attorneys and so forth really need serious board consideration.
Well, thank you for answering that question. I will keep it brief because what you just asked is the 3 days worth of training from the School Board Association, right? What you asked is just a lot of stuff, but here's my, and I know for the sake of time, I will keep this quick. And if you want to go into more detail later on, I can definitely make sure that happens. But my first response is to several things that you say is, one of the things that's most near and dear to my heart is parliamentary law. And actually, I'm a certified parliamentarian. And I'm actually training a FFA team right now to take to National FFA Convention in Indianapolis. So I'm in the middle of Robert's Rules of Order deep. It's a 500-something page book, and I'm into that deep, and it has been revised. And so we're on the 12th edition. So I really believe that's a tool you can use to make meetings efficient. The experience I can bring to you also says at some point in time, your brain capacity is done, your sitting capacity is done, your thinking, you just can't do after X number of days, not days, minutes, hours, your bad decisions start to happen when things go too long. And so if you're talking about school board meetings and doing the best things for districts and for students, it's my firm belief that extra long, really, really exaggerated board meetings are not productive for making wise decisions. Matter of fact, it's counter to that because you're exhausted, your brain capacity, you just can't. There's been all kinds of brain studies about that. You just can't sit and think, you just can't. It's not realistic expectations for a human body to do that. So I always think shorter is better. Not thorough, but shorter is better. My thoughts from my experiences in this world. The consent agenda is a tool you could use to make it shorter, right? And by all means, it could be reviewed by those people, but back to what I'm talking to Mr. Ortiz about being prepared. If you come to the board meeting and start to go through those things, at that moment, you're gonna have questions that could have been answered ahead of time at the consent agenda. And I don't know what you guys do in terms of your process. If you have your committee meeting, you know, right before, and the consent agenda is ruffled through all that stuff, and then immediately that committee then brings it to the board for a vote, and there usually is a discussion at the consent agenda part because you have delegated that to the committee. All the questions have been hashed out. Really, it should be a matter of just a few minutes. I move to pass the consent agenda with the assumption that whoever's on that committee has already done all their due diligence. If you want to be on that part, then you need to be also volunteering for that committee. But in a school board meeting, I don't think you want to go, and I could be wrong. I don't think you want to go through with the great detail on a consent agenda as you would just line items listed. The whole point of it is to have a consent agenda to save time, right? And so definitely you want to have your questions answered, but I would say it'd be my recommendation to you, Lane, and I don't know again your processes. Your meetings are Tuesdays, or meetings Tuesdays. So you get your packets on Friday, I'm assuming, right? So I would say, Lane, you need to have like, you know, an hour or whatever, 2 hours available by phone, by Zoom, by email, by whatever to dedicate to the board in case they, hey, I got my packet on Thursday and I reviewed this, and this. Can you answer this, and this for me? So that you're responsive on Monday, and then down on Tuesday, then you come here with a clear picture, you're prepared, all 5 of you are prepared. And then your meeting can go efficiently without having to ask the questions you have a right and a desire and a need to know. Because if you do it all here, then what's happening is you're being counterproductive because you want your question answered. You have a right to have your questions answered. You need to have your questions answered, but doing it at your meeting is now been where you're just mentally worn yourself out, where you're not able to make the best decisions because the meeting is so long. So, I don't know if that answered your part of the question and the consent agenda part of it, but that's my kind of knee-jerk reaction to your question at surface level.
And I think that that's probably feasible, because, if we can get the thing, like you say, on Friday, Thursday or Friday, that would be.
Yeah.
Something useful to us.
Yeah.
But sometimes our meetings are so packed with information that the information that Lorraine is trying to gather isn't available, so we don't get our packets until Monday.
Right, well, when I was here before, as a group, you know, as a team, I mean, my job in the next 12 months with you guys is to help you kind of work on the teamwork part of that, right? From your district sites, your AP principals, your principals, to all of the things. I think I've been asked to kind of help figure out some systems that might be better. So you're gonna have to trust one another to do your job, right? And so one of the things is to get the board packet out on whatever day and time that you're supposed to get the board packet out, and that's it. If it's not in the board packet, it's not on the agenda, end of story, put it on next month. Right, if you don't get it in, you don't get it in, that's how it goes. And then you, as a board member, can commit to reviewing it Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whatever, and then you can find some time, and no one can interrupt you. You're not going to schools, you're not going to whatever, that is the time for you to be available for phone calls or whatever, to clarify, so that when you get to the agenda, the consent agenda, whatever, committee, whatever's coming, you have answered their questions, but you've done it in a succinct, informative, but not lengthy, way that makes you're just gonna get weary. You're just gonna wear yourself. I didn't mean to sound like shocked, but when you said, I hope we're out of here by 8, I was like, whoa, I hope we're out of here by 8. That because energy stuff, I don't know. Anyway, you get weary because you want to know and you want to help. All of you guys in these chairs want to help kids and help the district, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But then that means being prepared and having good systems to make all that be efficient. So, does that help?
Yes, can
Okay.
I follow up on a question to Ms. Daly? So what I'm hearing is the recommendation would be when we get our board packets. If we have questions directly related, we could email or Zoom or call or whatever Mr. Wagner, so that we could set up a time to be able to talk and ask some of these questions in advance. That's the recommendation I'm hearing.
Yes, because you have questions, you want to know, and good board members do have questions, right? It's my estimation that if you don't have good questions, if you don't have good questions, you don't really sort of care about stuff. So having questions means you care about these, you want to get those answered, like Mr. Ortiz's initial question. I think that's important for you to do. On the other hand, I'll just compare for you, one of the best run, most efficient districts that I know of in the state, they get grouchy with each other if their meetings are longer than half an hour. Right, because they've done the work, they've asked the question, they know what's going on, and they get to these settings, and they don't have to bring up all of that stuff because they've done the work and they're there for the purpose, and they don't have this be a public forum to kind of just, whatever that turns into, it's not productive use of your brain power. You just can't, and especially in the evening, right? It's me, you've been at your job all day long. I know these guys have been at their jobs all day long. You're just weary. You can't, that your brain can't do that like, forever, right? So that's why I say, and so this, one of the best things I'm telling you, 30 minutes, and they're effective, run well, all the stuff, and they don't really need drugs, but they do make little kind of jabs like, hey, it's 28 minutes, hurry up. So it just, not that that's your goal. I never had board meetings over an hour, or my board did get drugs. So that's why I was a little bit like, ooh, everyone eat fast. So anyway, yes.
I've always never understood it. I've been on other boards. I was a commissioner, I was a councilman. And we always discussed the issue before we voted. And here it was backwards. We voted and then we talked about it.
What you're supposed to
We
do,
make a motion, I'm sorry. We make a motion, we second the motion, and then we open the floor to discussion. After discussion, then we vote.
that is correct. That is correct.
But like I said, we've done it
other way.
opposite.
Yeah.
To where, we talk about it first and then we see who wants to make a motion, if we didn't even get it on the floor.
And you know why, and here's my Robert's Rules of Order answer, you know why that's wrong? The reason that's wrong is because it's not property of the assembly to discuss until it's moved. So until it's, I move to do blah, 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 and a second, it doesn't belong to you. It's not even appropriate for you to discuss, it doesn't belong to the assembly, you are the assembly, right? So you have the motion, it is seconded, and if it doesn't get a second, it dies, and it doesn't come before you, because it's not yours, you know, your property.
So then-
And then you discuss, I love it for all these reasons, I hate it for all these reasons, and then you vote.
Right, that's what she's saying.
Yeah, that's what
That
you do.
we're voting and then we're talking about.
No. Move, second, discuss, vote.
And I think we forget sometimes, we're in a hurry to make the motion,
Yeah.
because the motion is there, but even if we examine the agenda beforehand, and we get our packets early, would we be able to voice our concern as to, okay, what is this really about? I don't know anything about what is on the agenda, that we should address that to Mr.
Again, that'd be my recommendation, that you have some time, I mean, if you guys, let's just pick on people, I don't mean pick on, I mean, pick on friendly. Let's pick on Lorraine first, right? It'd be Lorraine's job to get the board packet to you by 4 o'clock on Thursday, or 5 o'clock on Thursday, or 2 o'clock, whatever time it is the right time, before your board meeting. So you need to commit to do that, end of story, all it is, if you don't have it in the board packet too late, it goes out, right? That's the end of it. And then you guys would commit to just reviewing it, before Monday, and then Lane would commit to keeping his schedule open for whatever time period. So everyone's doing their jobs, so when you come to Tuesday, the board packet's there, you had it, you reviewed it, you answered the questions, right? And then, there may be sometimes you're gonna have questions that as a group, of course, but if you have an individual question you want answered, getting your question answered is different than lengthening the meeting for the sake of what could have been clarification the day before.
And I think that should be part of Lorraine's authority, is that if somebody wants something on the agenda, then they should be the one to provide all the documentation, make the copies and stuff, so that she's not, I think that's part of the problem, is that they tell what's on the agenda, and then she's the one that runs around and tries to get all the papers copied and
Sure.
every folder.
I appreciate your empathy for Lorraine, but let me just remind Lorraine that if Lane says to do that, right? Because the only employee the 5 of you have is Lane. Every other employee is his. And so if he says, hey, Lorraine, get all these made, then that's what she has to do, because she's his employee. Just like he needs to do what you need to do. So in terms of like systems and maybe way to talk about how to make your meetings and your time together more efficient, he needs to be responsive to you as well. You can't break the law. You shouldn't ask him to break the law, and you shouldn't ask her to break the law. There's the boundaries. But he's your only one. All the rest, all the other processes, all the other questions, all the other duties, all the other stuff, everybody else in this entire district is his.
So in essence, if it comes directly from Mr. Wider to Lorraine, then she has to get that done. But if somebody else wants to put something on the agenda, then, and they don't get the stuff to her quickly enough so they can go in the folder.
It would be my assumption that other people aren't contributing to the agenda anyway. I would assume that you two are doing the agenda by and large. As the president and the superintendent, that's where they should come from. By and large, it shouldn't come from everybody else. If they have things they want to get to either one of you, they could consider, but really it shouldn't be a group. It should not be a group effort to put the agenda together.
So I think it's gonna leave Lorraine of a lot of running around having to do all this stuff so that we can get our packets on Friday, which would give us time to look through all of them.
I agree. Well, I'm talking too long as always, and I'm trying to help you be expeditious.
One more.
If I can help you with time, yes, ma'am.
One more.
Yes.
As far as change of command goes, and we try to follow that, or the administration tries to follow that. And so they have an avenue, staff has an avenue to follow the chain of command. And so the staff member has a problem with one of the board members, they can bring that to the superintendent, and the superintendent then should bring it to the board. Now, if they don't follow the chain of command, then for me, it's a moot point. Now, what avenue does the board have if they have a complaint against one of the administrators who seems to be willing to make his comments just so that they can get it on record?
Well, again, I would remind you, that would seem to be a deep conversation. I'd rather kind of put that off to another time. But I would remind you that, it doesn't really matter the board's opinion or desire or ability for one of the directors or teachers or principals or custodians or bus drivers or anybody else. That really doesn't, that's really not in your purview per se. Again, all the employees belong to him. If there's an issue that he needs to know about one of his employees, for sure he needs to be told. But in terms of the board responding or interacting with one of the superintendent's employees, that kind of crosses over the boundary of delegation.
And we generally don't try to do that as
Yeah.
a board member, but we don't really have an avenue. Somebody on the administration side is making comments that are unprofessional.
Yeah, I think that needs to be brought to Lane in a private matter, not a public setting for sure. And Lane should not ever allow, and I haven't watched your meeting, I have no idea, it's not going to be a whole fictitious conversation. But if the board members are grilling staff, it's inappropriate, it should stop. If staff is grilling board members in a public meeting, it's inappropriate, it should stop. Right, your meeting should be on the agenda, that's it, what's best for kids, and be done with it. Anything else that's personal should not be allowed or tolerated by anybody. The president, board president, well, board members, all of you, but that should not, the interaction back and forth. And there is a conversation about board members having, public comment on their agendas, because you shouldn't respond to the public, right? If they come to you and say, hey, we have this thing, your response is, thank you, duly noted.
And the sign.
Done. Thank you, duly noted. There's no back and forth, it's your board meeting. And so if there's, I don't know if harassment is the word you use, but if that's back and forth, that should not be permitted, either which way, by either party. So,
But could we could that be part of the board policy, that to address, a person to be one of his staff, behavior, that should be addressed directly to the superintendent?
I will look at the board policy about disciplinary of students. Again, that's the boundary of delving into delegated authority, right? You may have no use for X, Y, and Z individual, right? But that really is not you weren't elected to appreciate or value X, Y, or Z individual. You were delegated to do the things that you listed off on statutes.
Unless that individual continues to make those comments during a board meeting.
Well, that individual needs to be stopped, and if it's Lane's employee, that needs to stop, whoever that is, or if it's fictitious again. But by the same token, that doesn't need to happen from the five of you either. Board meetings are to take care of business, do the agenda items be done, and that's why I say one of the most efficient districts in the state, 30 minutes and they're finished. Right, personal attack and personal conversations back and forth, that's not appropriate. Matter of fact, there's lots of boards, and I don't want to let them off hook if you want them on hook kind of thing, but, no offense. But lots of boards don't even have the directors come to meetings at all. None. It's the board that comes, superintendent that comes and probably the reins, sorry. But it's your model. It's your kind of model, but I'll look up those things. But if you have some things about anybody that's employed anywhere in the district and you wanna pass it along, then Lane should let you sort of say that, but then Lane should respond to you, thank you, duly noted. Because it's his responsibility to have disciplinary action or not. It's not his responsibility to tell you why you have concerns, any of the highlighted concerns, take it to him. But for him to go back and forth with you, that's a personal matter and it would get him into trouble.
And I think that addresses what Ron was talking about, because I have met individually with Ron, with Mr. Wider on certain things that are going on in the board meeting that should be happening. Yeah, and it's his job. I know we should make the request about that person being reprimanded for his records, so that because again,
You should not make that request. You should not. That's not appropriate.
I make that. But yeah, I want you to know that.
No,
There's, when somebody says, I want to, oh, that's okay, I got it on the record, then that's public.
right, which is why I say, if you go, just a suggestion, and again, I'm totally outside, I have no idea, this is all fictitious in my mind, I haven't watched a single minute of your board meetings. But if you'll commit to Lorraine having your stuff to do by whatever day, you commit to reviewing them by whatever day, you commit to having a time period before the meeting happens, then all this back and forth questioning really kind of gets synopsis, and so when you get to Tuesday night, you're done in an hour. Right, because then you're efficient, you're focused on kids, you have your question answered, and it's not a matter of, because you don't want, quite frankly, and I am this enough, it's starting to be time. Quite frankly, when you do it, and now it's required that you're on public. I don't know how many people are logged in, I can't tell from here you were listening on public, but it's required now in law that all your board meetings are viewable, right? The last thing you want to do is cause any smidgen of doubt in your authority as a board or Lane's authority as superintendent and your public. And if you're contributing to that by having this open forum, which you have to by law now, if that is happening, then you need to find every way possible around that so that your public has faith and confidence in people they elected to sit in these chairs, and you have the confidence in the person you hired to sit in this chair. And so for hashing things out in an ineffective system, then let's figure out the system and let's tighten the system up, because we can't change the law. The law says publicize your meetings. So, okay, great questions. It's been a pleasure to meet you. I hadn't met you before. Those are really great questions. Thank you. I'm taking up your whole time. You have a long agenda at 8 o'clock is coming.
Dr. Clark, Dr. Kimball.
Yeah, didn't we, when we had, a representative from, Walsh, what's her name? Bales?
Yes, Elena Gallegos.
She, assisted us in, addressing some of the, changes to, didn't we have a section there regarding when we were going to have items presented to the board, to the superintendent and to the board? Trying to remember what we had agreed on that would help address some of these issues. I was just trying to pull that up and I couldn't
Yes.
find it necessarily, but we do have a section that was trying to address that so that we would be much more
Correct.
efficient with getting it through the district office and over to us on
On the
Friday.
Friday. Yes, sir.
But we do have that section, so we probably would want to go back over that and make sure that we can see if it's, and I think it is appropriate, it probably will help us, but just for us to remember what it is that anybody else thinks and manage from that perspective.
Agreed.
That's what I that would be a big help.
Absolutely.
Well, I really love the suggestion that if we don't have to report, better in the agenda. So I like that.
It makes it
That way you
more
guys have
efficient
time to
for all of
vet
us.
everything.
I think we said that to the extent feasible, or something to that effect.
Yes.
In other words, there might be something.
Well, I think what we brought up in that conversation was that there are times where we might have a partial portion of a presentation done on Friday. There might still be more information that, was added on a Monday. But so we were wanting to be sure that the board was getting as much as possible Friday, but sometimes those updates, and it agreed, feasible was exactly
Yeah.
the
but-
word. I think you even suggested that.
Look at that because she realized that there may be instances where not all the information is coming from some of the external sources or something.
Sure.
And so we may have to be, it may require that. It may also be helpful if when we create calendars of our meetings and the topics that are going to be discussed, that calendar should be of assistance to the administration so they'll know a month or two ahead what reports may be coming up, and so that they can prepare for that
Yes.
time. That I think we also, I'm not sure whether we mentioned that.
We did, and the board calendar is item F on our agenda for this evening so that we could look over, and Mr. Wagner and I weren't certain if that was what you had composed as an outline, during your presidency of the board, that calendar draft. Did we get, is it in here? Because
last.
is that the last? So that was, we had that in here so that we could start doing exactly what I think you had already put in place so that we could be more efficient and know what's coming.
We also have to be vigilant about, so I know the discussion calendar and what material needs to be discussed at certain times, but we still have not even decided either meeting places. And I know my governor is asking, when are you guys coming to that? The mayor,
Sure.
that's still up in the air for us. So we're trying to make sure that we have a video attachment, everything. For that.
I think that that was a discussion that Mr. Widener and I had with technology and Mr. Tripplehorn and Mr. Jones about figuring out what we need to be able to have them at the different sites. And I think that they were looking into what that was gonna entail, but we absolutely have heard and are planning to do that. It just probably not in the first month to month and a half of what's going on right now. As you know, we've got a lot of other things. Yes, sir.
The other, in the presentation that we just heard was a comment about a committee. I'm assuming she's referring to the finance committee.
Ms. Mike, what you were
Or the budget.
referring to the finance committee meetings happening prior to the board meetings, is that the committee you were referring to?
That could be one of them. Audit committee can be another of those.
What I'm saying is that she was saying that it places a great deal of responsibility on that committee to ensure that it fully represents the interests of the full board. And that one of the things that the policy states, or in the there's a statement saying that the finance committee, for instance, takes all matters of finance, just to, and then it addresses those. The state in the state's manual on the budget that committee is the recommending body. So that's why she's saying you need to ensure that you get all the information that in the committee to render a decision to recommend or not recommend to the full board. And so that would mean that the timing of the finance committee meeting in relation to the board meeting would need to be visualized in some way, so we know that the finance committee is going to address these issues. Then subsequently it's going to be a board meeting, and at that board meeting, those issues are going to flow upwards to the full board, and whatever they take. And so I'm not sure how our committee, our finance committee is scheduled when it comes to that. Just saying that may be what we're doing.
Every Friday before the Tuesday board meeting, the finance committee meets.
So
I'm sorry, that this slide, this might be critical piece of information I didn't answer when you asked me this earlier. When you meet as a finance committee, that doesn't change the authority of what you're given by state statute, right? And so if you get to a bill or an invoice that's been paid on X number of dollars for commission attorneys and whatever else you had in mind, that has to still be paid, whether or not you want to or not, doesn't matter, because the PO has been issued and that is his authority. And if you don't pay that bill, then you're now in violation of a contract. So just because you're gonna meet in the finance committee, of course, you're gonna have discussions, but that doesn't mean you get to say, don't pay that one, don't pay that one, don't pay that one, but don't pay that one. If all of those invoices and all of those bills have been issued because of the purchase orders the school has issued, then it's a done deal.
close.
It's a done deal. You're passing everybody says I have to pay the bills, right? That's the most important thing I can say. If you decline to pay X, Y, and Z contractor or whatever attorney, that really isn't realistic because the purchase order already has been issued and that work has already been done. And his signature on the purchase order makes you legally bound to pay that bill. Whether or not you get to the meeting and go, oh, I didn't know it was gonna be so much, that's a lot, we should not pay that one, too late. The PO's already been issued, you're legally bound by Lane's signature. And so when you get to the finance committee stuff, that doesn't change, your legal rights don't change because you're having a smaller group. This is where you really rely on your team and your superintendent and the team he's put together in the business office to issue those things. That doesn't mean you sort of get to micromanage them either because they have a job.
So what needs to be clarified in some writing to describe what it is that the committee is going to do
Right.
and what it is up to the full board.
Sure.
So they'll have an idea, so we'll have an idea of what it is that, is the scope of their responsibilities.
As you're developing those, I would just encourage you,
Presentation, then action.
sure, and I would encourage you to trust the people that are in the school district, and if they've done their job, and just assume, that it's done well and right, rather than assume it's not done well and not done right. Right.
Like she said, if she sees something that she can ask Lane that Friday or whatever. Because we don't see the consent agenda till you see it.
That be,
So we don't even
You
know
remember-
till, we don't see it till you see it. We don't even make decisions on it.
So that's the clarity that needs to be, what is, does the board know what the finance committee has been covered? And she kind of clarified a bit more what you can and what you don't have to do. And so we might need to kind of some.
But if she has
You
a
could-
bigger
you could
description.
send me
Well, I was
from those
gonna-
meetings.
I was gonna say, would having the agenda for our finance committees at least give you, as a board, an idea of what is being discussed and, because obviously, if it's going on the agenda, it's going on the agenda as either a presentation or an action item. And usually there's a presentation before the action item. Does that,
That sounds like a practical thing to do. And so I remember seeing, actually, I've seen some school districts stream their finance committee meetings. I mean, it's open to the public. Am I correct? It's likely.
I would have to read, it's a new law, I'd have to read up on that. There is some conversations about how and what and exactly what is public and what's streamed and what's not streamed. Making available, isn't always the same definition, so without reading the new law, I'd have to get back to you.
So we'd have to, to go through some of these nuts and bolts and just, and about what is to be presented on the agenda. And then what's going to flow up. So I
to
can
the
see,
board agenda?
to the board, yeah. Okay,
one of my recommendations, to be more diligent about it, is to make sure that we're following the recommended before we make the motion, we have discussion. That
But
way,
that's the opposite of what Robert's Rules of Order says. It says we have to make, and that's what Ms. Lightfoot was clarifying for us. Where that you have to make the motion and second it, and then you open the floor for discussion.
Yes, if you don't own it,
Before voting.
yes, you don't
So
own it
there's
as an
always-
intended, yes.
We always have the opportunity, and I
Then
ask,
we'll-
because I always ask, after I ask for a motion, I always say, is there further discussion?
and
So,
sometimes it doesn't happen. I think what I'm suggesting is that maybe the vice president take note of that and say, wait a minute, we gotta have discussion first.
there is
Or the-
always, yes, consent agenda, you do not ask for discussion. That is the only item when there's a vote that I do not ask for discussion. And that's because my understanding with consent agenda is that those are, are bars which are listed. And then if we have the monthly bills and expenditures. But I went by, what Dr. Guy's meetings all were and watched all of them. There's not discussion for consent agenda. There's only discussion on the regular action items.
And that is correct, and the reason that is correct is because, you've had all that discussion in your finance committee meeting, and so the people on that committee now have vetted it all out, and they're bringing it to you with recommendations. So you would just trust again that they had done their due diligence and their work, and you're literally, that's why it's called consent. You're consenting to what the work that they did on your behalf. And obviously, some of you guys are on that board, on that committee, right? There's staff members, there's community members, there's a prescribed group of people who are on that committee, including board members. And then when it comes to you, you literally are consenting because the work's already been done. That's why it's done that way. That is
but
correct.
you said you don't see the consent agenda.
No, we get the consent agenda on Friday, but we have a discussion in the meetings, what is going to be added to the consent agenda. But we don't see it typed up the way you all see it. We just get the,
Let's clarify that.
yes,
Um, if the finance committee is going to, identify or see a item that it asks, that it has some questions about, then that's, I think, acceptable.
I think the finance committee should do the same kind of due diligence that you're being asked to do as board members before the finance committee meeting.
So I just want to make sure that I understand what it is that you guys can see, what the finance committee is going to see. When and so if there could be one or two, the last one was only one, I think.
right.
And so we can have multiple because it just comes up.
Right, so this is the meeting that we're having on Friday. So this is very similar to all of the agendas that we get. We will get a list of everything that's being discussed, you know, and then we have our discussions about everything. And we'll get supporting information, whether it's the, you know, bank statements or, you know, what the bills look like for certain things. You know, it's definitely, we're getting the information, but that consent agenda that is typed up, a lot of the time, you know, if we have a question about something and we say, well, what is this about? We'll have that discussion, and if it's something that needs to go to the board, that'll go into a presentation. And not every time does it have an action item, it'll be something, absolutely. So
How do you determine if it needs to go to the board?
if it's over, yeah, a large purchase or talking about curriculum, supplies, all of those kinds of things are what typically go to the board. But if there's like the buying the trucks, for example, those we had talked about the trucks, but then other things came up that were more important. And the two trucks went by the wayside 2 or 3 meetings until it was a more appropriate time because other items were more important. I think one of those times was a heating and cooling issue at Los Alamitos. And so rather than us sitting in the finance committee saying, you know, oh, we want 2 shiny new trucks for the district, but we're gonna have the kids at Los Alamitos be cold. You know, we said, no, we don't wanna do that. We want the heating and cooling, the heating, you know, at the time to come forward. But the trucks did make it eventually.
Thank you.
So,
To the board.
so basically, what you suggest is that you guys, that the finance committee can share the agenda and also the minutes of the action or whatever, how the finance committee responded. That would be helpful. So I think that's practical to do.
Sure.
There was something else, but I'm not sure what, I lost my train of thought of that. But as you can tell, the nuances still need to be, we all need to have some clarity on those things. And I think that this discussion is helpful. I'm trying to think of one other thing, and I just can't remember. If I come back to it, it had to do with some procedure that I'm sure. But,
Will you have paid anything, you know, over the 60,000?
no,
No, just or
minutes, agendas.
third.
In this, there are finance committees, there's the audit committee, and there's been the budget committee. And so is there occasions when school districts use the finance committee and the budget committee together? Or is that separate? Trying to think back what
think
the
that'd be,
policy said,
I haven't got your policy pulled up, but I think that'd be appropriate.
but it also is, feasible for a budget committee to be separate, that it may require.
I don't think there's a legal requirement for a budget committee. There is a legal requirement for a finance committee and audit committee, that is true.
Right.
If you have established a budget committee, that's because you have decided to do that on your own. That's not a prescribed requirement in statute. So if you have expectations for them to do the work in finance committee, that'd be fully appropriate. What you do have to have is budget hearings, prescribed number of those in the budget season, but not necessarily that's not required by state statute.
So would it be opportune for the finance committee to be put on the agenda to make a report, as well as the audit committee to put on the agenda, so that if they're meeting, the whole board should know what the meeting is about, and what comes up.
I think we should check into the rules about how often they have to meet. I don't imagine the audit committee has to meet every single month. The finance committee may have to meet every single month. They probably would, but I think you would want to have responsiveness based upon the amount of time they have to commit to their committee duties by statute.
Could I, cite a statement from the policy?
Oh, of course.
It says here, the annual budget is a written plan for the allocation of financial resources, etc. That the EPS shall serve as the basis for developing the budget annually. The EPS. The superintendent shall establish a budget development process which ensures the involvement of all stakeholders, employees, parents, etc. Such representation, at least in part, should be selected from that body of stakeholders that develop the EPS committee recommendations. That's the acronym. The recommendations from stakeholders be made to the superintendent for review and adjustment. If I recall right, in the history of Mr. Wagner and Walter and Francis, that I believe there used to be there has been in the past a budget committee that reflected what it says there. And that began sometime in the spring, and they would be engaged by the district administration to undertake what this says. And that's what I remember. And it doesn't state specifically committee, it says process.
Right, right.
So-
And you're not gonna develop, I would doubt very seriously that the finance committee is gonna develop the salary schedule, right? That needs to be done in-house with Lane's staff and his people based upon what they're given from the public education department. However, there may be some conversations about the calendar, and that's also part of the budget, right? And it's kind of ongoing from February till March through April sometimes, based upon when your due date is due. And so you have X, Y, and Z things on your first budget year you wanna talk about. You may have priorities for your district you want to talk about, but that's why it is a legal requirement. I think it's a legal requirement to have 3 budget hearings to develop that. That doesn't mean that you do all the work, again, back to delegating to Lane and his people to get the work done in the offices that they hold during the day.
What I was trying to point out is not so much that, I was talking about is the process of developing the budget. It's talked about the budget development process, which would involve a variety of entities.
Sure, and ways, right? As an example, when the calendar and the whole 180-day calendar thing and 4-day week thing and 5-day, all that kind of comes up, you can send out a Google document to your parents and say, which day which calendar who do you prefer? That's also getting stakeholder in, but they never come to a meeting, they just fill out a survey that you send them on their Gmail or whatever. But there's all kinds of ways of doing processes of getting information to develop the budget.
So what I would suggest, board members, that we think about how we're going to do the budget process. How this district, and the superintendent shall do this. But we need to ensure that we have an understanding of how that process is going to take place. We haven't had that discussion before. It would be good to have that discussion early on, not wait till next January, so we'll kind of have an idea up front this fall how we're going to build the budget and make sure we understand what the needs rights involvement in stakeholders. It could be quite extremely organized, elaborate committee meetings, which is what we've done before, committees, the budget committee that presented schools, administration, others, tribes, and then the presentations would be made to seek the input of those groups. That has been done in the past. And actually, you and I were on one of those budget committee, one of the budget committees. But that's something I would suggest we explore in this third structure, Mr. Wagner. I'll play that out this coming year. Thank you.
Well, we're on the topic of budget. Is there anything else you would like to add to the budget discussion?
I've actually,
Segued nicely into that.
I've written down a lot of the suggestions and I think it's probably a great idea. If we do have those finance meetings every week, every other week, and I can send the agendas to all of the board members. I can run a Zoom meeting where it would take notes of the meeting and so minutes. So I could send you all those minutes and you would have that. Lorraine and I love the idea of if we don't have it, it comes off the agenda. And so on Friday, if we don't have the stuff, Lorraine and I can get that stuff done and get it out to you. So I think Mrs. Whiteman, that was a great discussion. Your 15 minutes was wonderful. I'm gonna start talking like you, so that way.
You gotta talk
We
about
get lots done.
You just gonna say you gotta get to F, you got an hour and 15 minutes left.
Item B on our agenda is
Oh, hold on. I'm sorry. Organizational chart.
organizational chart is here. It's in your packet. It's the same one that we had it at our meeting last month, 2 meetings ago. It's the same organizational chart. So Lorraine and I just included it, and so I just wanted you guys to have a copy of it. That's how we're operating.
And this is the same organizational chart, just with the correct names in it for this year, but is this the same organizational chart that the board approved last year?
Correct. There are, as I mentioned in that meeting, there are 4 positions that are not here that we have kind of combined. So with the loss of the ESSER funds, we have combined some of those positions. We have a coordinator who used to do attendance, and now that coordinator is doing attendance and synergy. And so we tried to kind of absorb those. So this is 4 less positions in what we had.
That's this,
Yes, sir.
you have given the spreadsheet that the last one is pretty extensive. This seems to be
This is just,
consolidated.
yeah, this is just the color one that is kind of Lorraine just pulled it out of the board packet, right?
This is one that we approved in, when did,
Last year.
well,
The one that went to Ed. Same one?
Originally, I don't know if organizational charts go to public education
Yeah,
department.
they do.
I don't know about that.
And the reason why I know that is because, back in, they had said, we approved the budget and the organization chart, and then it took care. And then we were red flagged because there were certain positions that were funded and given $8,000 raise without our knowledge of the board. And so it came back from the CAD. They red flagged that and wanted us to explain why there was that increase in budget, increase in salary without a desk audit or without any reasonable explanation as to why they were getting. There were 6 directors, and I think they're still the same here, it's a different wording. And so I know that you send it in, it goes in, but unless it's changed over the last I'm trying to remember, because we met up with you after.
Well, and I would hope that the PED wouldn't be overstepping their authority by questioning you guys about my position. I'm your employee. I'm your one employee, so you guys shouldn't get in trouble for who I hire.
I think maybe the clarifying word is, PED doesn't want your salary, or they don't want that, what's it called, organization, they don't care about that. They want your salary schedules. And that's a true statement.
So maybe that's where, maybe that's
Maybe
where
that's
the.
what I got reflect.
Budget went up, six positions, 8,000, went up by $48,000. And so that was enough of an amount for the finance committee to red flag and say, okay, explain to us why. And so, and we actually were dumbfounded because we didn't know either.
Nobody's ever asked me for this, just the board, and I do put it out to the administrators, they have it, but I've never sent it in to anybody. Yeah,
Clarity.
perfect. Strategic plan, I think we can we kind of broached this subject, in our last public meeting, and I wanted to bring it back and give a little more explanation. We have a wonderful strategic plan. It was written in 2021. It expires in 2026. So we have a 2026. And so
We're jumping the gun.
we need to be ready. We need to be ready as our strategic plan evolves. Right now, there's a lot of meat to our strategic plan. There's a lot of good there. And a year ago, the board tasked the administrative staff and I to work on coming up with what is the foundation of the strategic plan. And so we have our four goals. We have the one pager that's very much our foundation. And what does that look like? And as you get into the strategic plan, I think it's 48 pages. As you get into the strategic plan, there's lots of details as to how you work with each goal and how you how you make that happen. Our strategic plan has to evolve. Like I said, there's a lot of good meat there. And so we want to keep the strategic plan in the system that it currently has. We don't necessarily want to get away from what it is. And so President Lee was at a meeting in July. And Dr. Kurt Steinhaus, who was the former Secretary of Education a few years ago, he is now, Mrs. Lightfoot is working with the RECs. Dr. Steinhaus is working with CES, which is Cooperative Education Services, and they work with school districts all over the state. And Dr. Steinhaus is providing a service where he will help you update your strategic plan. He will help with those stakeholder meetings. He'll help to, kind of massage how the strategic plan evolves. And so I would like to consult with CES and Dr. Steinhaus as we kind of move into updating the strategic plan. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now. And like I said, this is the first conversation. This is the first steps. And Dr. Steinhaus would do a really good job of helping us. So.
And I had asked board members for this to be on, our work session agenda, just so we could start the conversation. Because again, Mr. Widener really likes the strategic plan that's in place, and I apologize because I thought when I looked at our plan, our hard copy, it said 2025. I didn't realize it said 2026. So again, I'm probably jumping the gun wanting to start the conversations. But, one of the things that they've really emphasized at the leadership summit up in Taos in July was that a good district knows that it's a living document. And that there are things that need updating and changing, and it's a good idea for the district to be very aware of it. And one of the things I had mentioned to Mr. Widener is that every school should have these 4 goals posted right when you walk in. So that every parent, every child, every teacher, every, janitor, grandparents, anybody walking in can see these goals. And every item that is happening at the school, you can look at the strategic plan and say, oh, look, we're meeting goal number 3 doing this. We're meeting goal number 1 when we do this. And so I have made the recommendation that that might be a really good practice. And that was Dr. Steinhaus who had suggested that that goes into and be visible at every school site so that everybody knows what the main goals are.
Dr. Guy mentioned a moment ago that EPS plan, and as we know, EPS plans have evolved to DASH plans. Dr. Martin and I have met with all of the administrators, and we want their DASH plans to emulate our strategic plan. And so it's really a continuum of working towards these core goals. And I do love the idea of having, we have a print shop here in the district, and we've talked about making posters of this that are in every school. Now the DASH plans are tied directly to this and working with these goals. Our professional development forms, if somebody wants to go to a workshop and they need, which goal are you working towards? And so they have to indicate that before we'll approve their leave. And so it will continue to evolve. I would like to start those conversations with Dr. Steinhaus and see how he's working with strategic plans. Correct.
And I think when we first developed this, there was no COVID. And so we need to really adjust it because we're playing catch up now with the students. And the data is going to be skewed because I've read it somewhere where it said almost every school in the state suffered some kind of setback with COVID. Even the ones that were considered premier schools are still now finding themselves trying to revert back to old programs like Read 180 to bring up the students' level of proficiency. And that's something at every meeting when they make those presentations. They tell us we have a 5% gain. That means nothing to me because that 5% is down here with low proficiency. We're not. Now, we were at proficiency and we made a 5% gain. Then I would see the worthwhileness of that. But to tell me that they only achieved by 5%, they were way down below proficiency. And so more 15% to me is more suitable because that's bringing us probably to level. And then from there we go to maybe 20, 25%, whatever it is that. So I'm looking at this, the biggest question we had was trying to, interpret what is cultural diversity. We spent up like Longhorn and with Mr. Jones and Mr. Sandoval. What is cultural diversity? None of us really could define what that was and what we expected to be achieved in our strategic plan. So we went round and round with that. And that has to change. That should have changed when the Yali Martinez lawsuit was settled. We should have seen a change in that right away. Unfortunately, we didn't do that. So maybe that's something that we need to task ourselves with, is to look at each goal and determine at least maybe one or two things that need to be implemented. Based on where our efficiency of the not to be involved, Mr. Dr. Martin, but, I'd rather see, and not rather, we need to see greater percentages of efficiency happening instead of just the 3 and 5%. Otherwise, we're not doing our job as board or as a school district. We're failing, and that could be the reason why a lot of, I know some of the kids are coming back, but what I find out when I ask for it, well, too hard where they were at, they came back telling me that it's easy here, or that they seem to be able to get away with more here than they could say. The reason I'm saying this is because I worked at people in schools this past year, and I couldn't understand. I would ask the kids, why you were at Anjali, or you were at Gala, how you came that over here is it was too easy there, so we were being challenged, so we came back really easy. So, and that's funny to hear from actual students that I taught the advanced 11th graders and 9th graders. And so that was always what they reiterated to me is it's too easy over there. Except what I used to hear is just, well, it was too hard. And so,
Isn't that interesting though? I think that's the conundrum that we're in education right now, is that we're being told by the state, you know, you have to keep passing everybody and you have to, you know, make this lower standard. But I know, well, I'm speaking my age, but I know growing up, we always had to be pushed and pushed and pushed. And that bar was constantly moving higher and higher and higher. And so we were always striving to do more and more. Whereas I think the conundrum about today is that we keep lowering everything to help the kids get to a certain level. And it's a tough thing, especially when the PED is, you know, telling us you've gotta have this level. But then, you know, how do we implement? It's a great question to look into. What can we do to improve? What can we do to raise that bar and do more?
Our students have evolved a lot too through the pandemic. We have a lot of kids that now want a cyber option. They wanna, you know, they wanna have a job. They wanna get a job. And so it's definitely a different time in education now, where we have kids that want to be in Zoom classes and they want to, you know,
Tricia's alone, they want to say 8 o'clock. And it's why don't we task ourselves to look at each of the 4 goals and then come up with at least 2 recommendations as to how we're going to, what we're going to add to it or revise what's already on there, because we just started school, and so we need to make sure that we get these plans done or at least implemented, and then give the task then to our staff to address that goal. Otherwise, we look at it.
No,
That's great.
Yeah. Modify that bit.
Well
Implementing your motion.
well checked.
What it says here is 2026, I don't remember.
I thought it was
It's to me, it's
2025.
2025,
I thought so
so
too.
I think it is 2025. So we need to operate on that premise that, because I tried to look it up and I couldn't find my version.
The old version was 2023,
Yeah, there is 2023.
and
And
then
And then I got one that says 2025.
I'm gonna grab it
Because I don't
real quick,
remember the
just
board
to,
ever saying that we're gonna do 2026. So I don't think we can just, someone just in the lottery decide we're gonna do 2026. trying to think back, because I remember the iterations that what's his name, William was involved with us in the that last one you were talking about. And anyway, what I would suggest is to take it or extend the idea, it's not modify. Extend the idea, taking it when she was suggesting, and then having the board you have a conversation with Mr. Stone. So we can explore what it is that what it is that would be the essential elements of a strategic plan and the process of that. Because I think it's important for us to have that conversation to feel comfortable where this person is. Is this person going to, does that person have the resources?
I think we have to have it ready to roll 2026, right?
Okay,
Well,
So
because this says 2022 to 2025.
yeah,
that's what I was saying as you left.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
on January 1st, 2026, we have to.
so why don't we clear that up at the next time we discuss that to make sure that
Perfect.
whoever's gonna provide us the external support that we all kind of understand what the period of time is.
Well, and he may have a really good strategy for how do we define what cultural diversity is.
Well, and those things we need to discuss.
Yeah.
One of the critical issues is going to be the Equity Council. The state says the Equity Council needs to exist. And it said, and I sent you this stuff, it says the role of the Equity Council in the budget and education plan design process. Okay? And all 89 school districts were supposed to create an Equity Council. And it says here that, and this is the only, I don't want to go into detail, I just want you to have us have that as part of the discussion, is how does this fit into it? If the head is saying, thou shalt do this, then, and I don't know whether they said that, please, it says that the Equity Council was created to respond to the Yazzie Martinez. And they're supposed to be responsible for informing and advising school boards. See, that's the kind of to ensure that the Yazzie Martinez and Yazzie consolidated lawsuit decision is implemented with a focus on the students' need most in additional support. And there was a statement here describing their role in developing the budget. And that, it is pretty explicit. But I don't recall the board ever engaging its council in the discussion. But nevertheless, it's still a conversation that tribes have, is if the Equity Council is still a viable part of the Mexico Public Education Department, and what it is asking us to do, then are we going to develop a better understanding of what the Equity Council is supposed to do and how is it supposed to be involved with it? You are trying to come up with a committee of Yazzie Martinez. And but what I'm saying here is that when we talk about their budget and actually the strategic plan, it also says informing the design of the educational plan, putting forth a recommendation for the CLR, etc. So we need to converge these things together so we have a complete understanding of what is it that we're going to do. The tribes are concerned about equity and unfairness or inequities. The tribes are concerned about having culturally and linguistic responsive education. Tribe wishes to see that those things, that the at-risk populations are addressed. However, in our district, we also have the Martinez side of it. It means that the district has populations that are in addition to Americans. Native Americans are about almost half of them. But we know that the Yazzie Martinez judgment refers to Native Americans, English learners, students with disabilities, and economically disadvantaged students. So how do we address those? Deputy council is seeking to have us address that. That's what the PED is saying. Now, I asked you the last time, have you received any recent official correspondence saying, we'll get them better, let's go through the equity council to get it started, or anything related to Yazzie Martinez recently? And I haven't heard that there has been any direct communication. Nevertheless, the tribes see that the Yazzie Martinez is an absolute, that they desire that we be responsible, as you're saying, that we address those the needs of the kids in some significant way. So when you're saying that you were suggesting a committee, there already is a committee. It's called the Equity Council. And the Equity Council is comprised of certain ones that were identified and participated in it. So I'm assuming that that entity still exists. I don't know. That's what I think we would need to clarify. I noticed that on your Yazzie Martinez, that it described that. But I think the board has to be educated on what is the ongoing ramifications of what Yazzie Martinez is for itself. And then have that dialogue with the tribes so that our dialogue and their dialogue converge and come up with a unified perspective of what it is that we want to do, which translates into a strategic plan. And that's what Mr. Stanhouse because he actually visited all the tribes when he was the secretary. So he's familiar with a lot of this.
When did this happen? Is it
So-
here?
Yazzie Martinez started about 8 years ago.
So,
And-
maybe like 8 years behind.
Well, there was a lawsuit. We're kind of ahead of the game a little bit, and I'll kind of give you the history. This kind of goes into
Well, I was gonna
the
say,
next
we're
part, but
ready.
that's okay.
Yeah, it's
So what it was a lawsuit. There was the Yazzie family, there was the Martinez family, and they were talking about that their children were not properly given an equitable education in schools. Tasia Martinez used to work for our district, and she had a really good video that I will share with you, Walter, because I think these guys have all seen it.
What was the other superintendent?
Well, so it wasn't necessarily our school district. It's the family sued the state of New Mexico. And so they sued the state of New Mexico. It was in court for several years. I think it was ruled on in 2019. Is that right, Mr. Shea? In 2019, it was found that yes, these children were not given an equitable education. And so that's where we see that, okay, schools need to have, COVID hit. And then schools need to have equity councils. They need to figure out how they're gonna address, there's 4 groups that are, and Dr. Guy kind of named off the groups. And it's funny because every student in our district is considered a low socioeconomic student. So, we have 3,000 kids. We have 3,000 kids that are considered low socioeconomic. We have, in our district, we have 250 of our kids that have an IEP, or they may have a gifted IEP. And so, that's part of the population that we have to work with. We're 40% Native American at least, right?
48 or 9.
40, I mean, and so our Native American students are impacted. We are only about 10% ELL, and that English language learners. So those would be our students that come here from somewhere else and don't necessarily speak English. But so all of 2014. So all of our kids are impacted. Well, so, okay, so it went to the courts and they said, okay, schools are gonna fix this, right? PED is gonna help work with the schools to fix it.
Well,
In the fall, before you were on the board, Mr. Hudson, we had Preston Sanchez, who was the attorney in the Yazzie Martinez case. He came and spoke to our board, and I was trying to get him here tonight. He unfortunately had another commitment, but he is going to Zoom with us. And he's going to talk with us about where they are, unfortunately, there has been no money tied to it because we went through COVID and school districts got a lot of ESSER money, which we got lots and lots of ESSER money. That was how we paid for the masks and we paid for the hand sanitizers and we paid for the air filtration systems and COVID tests that we gave out, we paid for all that stuff, the plexiglass and so now so we're kind of, as a district, we're kind of ahead of the game. 2 years ago, we had a really good handle on what equity council was. We had an equity council. Ours was comprised of kind of employees and students, and from what Dr. Guy says, it sounds like it probably needs to be more like a stakeholder group, right? We probably need parents on there. We probably need we need representatives from Cebolleta Land Grant. We need representatives from all three of our tribes that we work with, as well as special ed parents, and so ours is evolving. Ms. Martinez left the district right before the new year, and so we were looking to replace her. We did get her replacement, Mr. Baldo, and today he held his first IPAC meeting with which is the Indian Parent Advisory Committee, and so we had a good group of parents representing the tribes here today. Mr. Valdo is going to be working on reestablishing our equity council. And I've been trying to be proactive on Yazzie Martinez. What does that look like? What have we put in? Because all 3,000 of our kids are kind of in one of those subgroups, right? So I've tried to look at where are we spending, where are we allocating funds that is helping our kids? Are we providing literacy to help our ELL students? Are we providing the therapies that our kids need for their IEPs? And so that's kind of that long list of money there. That's money that we've just put into these interventions, right? We as a finance committee, I think we talked about this in our last meeting, no, 2 meetings ago. We talked about that there are some funds that we can set aside that we can help to address more of these concerns. Like, what does that look like? And so that's where we need to go to our stakeholders. That's where we need to talk. We have Acoma Department of Education. We have Laguna Department of Education. We have the Baca chapter, the Rama chapter. And so we need to bring those folks in and say, how can we help your students? What can we do for the students that you send our district? And right now, if we set aside that forest reserve money, that's a pool of money that isn't necessarily allocated to anything right now. And we talked in the finance committee that we want that to go to addressing Yazzie Martinez. And so $300,000 a year.
See, that's a topic that needs to be brought up to the full board, not just to the finance committee.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And that's why I wanted to bring this to you all. And so And I like what you were saying, Dr. Wright. It sounds like our equity council probably needs to not be teachers and students. It probably needs to be Ackerman Department of Ed, Baca chapter, representatives from Subway and, so it, I think that this will help me with,
Was there one?
no,
It's
no,
on them.
they've only been, it's only been about 3 years that since, is that after Dr. Stein? That they've been pushing school, and a lot of school districts don't have an equity.
And they're not pushing
Oh,
anymore.
I thought maybe,
They're
well, I
not.
thought maybe the state created one, and then we just, yeah, we have to create our own.
No, and it's kind of like, we're in the battle between the state and the PED, and
That's
the-
what you would think of
the state saying, schools, you need to take care of it, and the PED saying, state, give us some money so we can do that, and
Last year, in Albuquerque, when they had their NSBA conference, they were still schools were still asking, how do you create an equity council? A lot of them still were unsure as to what it really was coordinated to be in charge of. And so they asked a lot of burning questions, and that was the leader before Romero. They asked him.
that was
Okay,
Dr. Stein, right?
Yeah. Okay, so then again, when Mr. Romero came in, they asked him the same question. So really, most of the public schools don't even know how to organize or what its task or really should be. So they're still asking the same question.
This, Miss Martinez that worked for our district, she was really good about she read through it, she worked on establishing an equity council, but like I said, it was teachers and students, and they made recommendations, right? So they made recommendations of things that we could do. But Dr. Guy's right, it probably needs to include our stakeholders. It needs, we need,
And it needs to be part of our budget.
Ms. Chavez was here as a stakeholder tonight, and because this is interesting to her. And
Like he said, it's part of the budget, and then so we want to think that will address the Martinez.
And that was.
Absolutely.
That was one of the
And
complaints.
we need to, we have to support all of our children. And we, and those 4 subgroups are, we need to commit whatever funds we can to help, what does that look like? Is that culturally linguistic responsive teaching? Is that literacy programs in elementary school? What does that look like? And so how do we provide opportunities for all 4 subgroups?
And the other thing is that our textbook, the ones that we see or do our publishing of our district textbook, there's very little culturally responsive information in any of those textbooks. It wasn't until recently, because I was on the book committee too, and Prentice Hall had like a paragraph of the original Wampanoag, who were the original tribe that met with the Europeans. It wasn't Pocahontas and the story cartoon you see. It was the Wampanoag. And where I learned that was I was at a seminar in Martha's Garden in Boston, and the Wampanoag tribe. And it was at that time it was never in the textbooks. But after that, then Prentice Hall, they had about maybe a paragraph. They talked about the Wampanoag tribe. And so at the last meeting I went to, the government to government, the PED was asking these 2 Ugandan professors to write a history book. And excuse me, but they were both Anglo. And so I'm like, okay, and I got him and asked, who are you going to get information from? And they're like looking at me like that. Their question. I said, you need to talk to the elders. If you're going to talk about history, you need to talk to the elders of every pueblo, every Plains Indian tribe, in order to rebuild that. Conroy Cheer from Acoma attempted to do that with that, Christine Call. So Surviving Columbus,
Oh, yeah.
and
It was on PBS.
yeah, and he
I mean,
dealt,
can't.
dealt mostly with just the Acoma Pueblo. But, so then I had, it's good thing, because I was teaching history at the time, I had the history book that the two UNM professors wrote years ago. And it was mostly about casinos, the feast days. There was little mention of tribal government or constitutions or, the ones that don't, tribes that don't have constitution. And so it was about this thing, and I was teaching history, and I said, well, did you really expect me to teach? This has nothing to do with tribes. And so I suggested that before you write this or publish it or approve it, you make sure that you have a representation from each one of the tribes. It's in July or March, I was tasked to be on the curriculum for APS schools. And so I was given the ninth grade to write a curriculum that was going to be followed by every APS school. And so the first thing, when I looked at it and I looked at their book, I said, there's nothing about culture. And so they had Spanish teachers, they had Mexican teachers, they had Filipino teachers, and I made that one maybe the reason they chose me to begin with was because I was the only I was their token in it. And so the first thing I suggested, I said, well, where are you going to get the native? Which book publisher has anything to do written about the tribes in the state of New Mexico? And or anywhere outside the state of New Mexico. So if you're going to develop a curriculum, then you're going to have to include all these things. Their TESOL, their EL, and their ELL are mostly geared toward the Hispanic and the Mexican culture. Because like at West Mesa, I ran into all those different types of cultures, and I used to stand in the hallway and listen to the Hispanics talk the different languages, mostly all Spanish. Then I'd watch the Mexican girl walk down the hall, talking, it was still Spanish, but it was their Spanish. And so when they came into my classroom, I used to ask them, how would you say this? And we had a few Navajo students, I had a few Navajo students and few Pueblo students. And so there was things that I finally brought out my book of multicultural education and said, okay, this is multicultural education just does not mean native tribes. It means the Hispanics, it means the Spanglish, it means the Mexican, it means the immigrants. And so my kids had a lot of fun looking at all different cultures and what they could bring to the classroom. And they each were tasked to do something within their culture that they could give to the other students so they would learn about it. So when I wrote that to this big committee, and it's still ongoing now, I finished the ninth grade curriculum, but it also had books in there from the different native publishers. And so that's something that you have to include in your curriculum. You can't just use Benson Hall, or I don't know what the things are anymore, but you have to be able to make sure that you include that. And then the ones about the Hispanic and the Mexican. If we're not doing that, then there's no way we're going to meet the rigid requirements of the Ani Martinez.
Well, and what's really interesting too is our culture here is going to be different than the culture in Shiprock because we have different kids and we have different history and so we have different languages, and so you're absolutely right. We have a whole very diverse culture.
Right, so next steps for Yazzie.
Next steps, Mr. Baldo and I are going to work together on trying to establish probably an equity council. I've been calling it a stakeholder group, but I think Dr. Guy is right on there. I think that it needs to be an equity council of stakeholders.
Well, if you just leave it at Yazzie Martinez, why is that? Because Yazzie Martinez speaks to equity, CLR, SEL. educational planning. So everything that Yazzie Martinez, if you look at it, actually says all aspects of
Yes.
your education
I figured you.
has to be, has to respond to what the judgment said.
Right.
So when you have this ad hoc group, they need to see that it isn't something separate. It actually has to make sense to us as a board, that when we spend money and annual budget on things that are going to be reflective of what we say are our goals, our action programs, and that those things are going to be addressing. Our plan is going to address the Yazzie Martinez issue, it's going to address equity, it's going to address CLR, it's going to address enrichment programs, it's going to address all those things. So they need to be able to feel that when you bring this group together, that it's not a set aside. That actually is what the judge is expecting is that it drives, it's a decision to say, get your act together and start to respond to the needs of these kids. And that you must have all the things that you do, your educational plan, your budget, your staffing of schools, and all that must respond to the needs of these kids because it hasn't happened.
From what little I read, most of these schools and districts are relying or clamoring that the public education department needs to fund these endeavors. And don't hold your breath, 'cause it's not going to happen.
Right, and that's what the state is saying. When you went to the government, that they're saying, you know, hold your school districts accountable. There's no money there to be accountable. And so, you know, at least, I want you guys to be able to go next time and say, hey, you know, we're innovative in trying to address this. And, you know, our district set aside $300,000 to do this and to meet, you know, so I think.
It must be based upon a plan. We spend funds because we have said this is how it's going to address these things. And so what I can see happening there. What I know right now is that a lot of the Indian professional in the education community are very critical of the state's failure to be responsive. Correct. Particularly the state and the state legislature.
But
And-
Zuni because they're the ones that, individual, the Yazzie Martinez were from Zuni. And so they moved forward with it without funding from Fed. And the last time I talked with them in Santa Fe, the board there, they already had a plan in and how they were, because they're the ones that brought the suit to begin with. And so, they weren't gonna wait for the Fed to fund their endeavors, they were going ahead. They might, we will bring somebody from the,
Yeah, and
find out what they're doing, and maybe at least give us some step.
I'll have Mr. Sanchez come to a very near future board meeting. And, Mr. Valdo and I will work on
What I-
that.
in addition to them, I think we would benefit from native professors in the UNM, at the University of Mexico, who are scholars in this whole area. They're the ones who actually are critical forces trying to drive this effort. They work with Preston, actually, there is an organization that an ad hoc organization that includes Preston and his organization, along with the tribes and the University of Mexico. It would be really helpful if we bring some of those consultants to the future meetings to help us understand what it is that we can do at the local level. Because what we're saying, no matter what the state is saying, we will do our best and try to create a program that's going to impact these kids.
What's the guy's name down
Not only
there?
that, but suicide money to do it.
He's from Honolulu, the UNS professor.
We'll read
No. He always runs that Native American tournament now. I think it was the, I worked with him when I worked at him.
Well, I'll suggest some names too. And you're gonna create this ad hoc group to help stimulate your exploratory things about this. And that's, yeah, I'm just making some suggestions and we're making some
I
suggestions.
think that's a great idea.
What I always know is about strategic planning, you always have timelines, you got deadlines, you gotta get it done. So you figure, okay, well, this is, August, so we better get it done so it has an impact upon the next annual budget. So that really, tightens the schedule. There's a lot of thinking that has to go on, a lot of organizing of different thoughts about these things. Each tribe will have their own perspective, for one thing. And I'm not sure who, all the names of these. Let's see.
So you'd like the first superintendent in our district to start working on this, or we're waiting for?
Mr. Pettis kind of started his
Why-
last year here, and then
See ya.
we're not, we're really not behind. We're kind of ahead of the game, because like, this is like, what was you saying? A lot of districts aren't doing, a lot of districts are kind of waiting for guidance, and so we're kind of, yeah, we're kind of ahead of the game. And so, but we need to, I like kind of what Dr. Guy was just saying, we need to consult professors and folks that are involved in pushing this, you know, because it's gonna still be around, and you know, it was a major lawsuit.
I think that you have to expand this, your representation. Because if you're only wanting one, I think what we need to have is somebody from DOE, Department of National Education,
It's a great idea.
who actually would be much more conversant about these issues, because they're the ones who have to address them. Having a representation from the Laguna Education Department and from the academic department. If you just do it political representation, a lot of times what happens is that they're not the ones who know.
Sure. Right.
So they need to get, they want to bring the ones who know within their tribe, within the organization. Land grant representatives, if you're gonna do land grant representatives, you can't just say, we're gonna have Ciboyeta and that person's gonna represent, the other land grant communities. So that might, and not be too happy about that. So what I'm saying, if you're gonna do that, you may end up having a larger group, which may be all right, because this is not necessarily a steering committee of sort. It's sort of like gathering some thoughts together of this whole district, pulling together, key entities. So what I don't see is a Grants, Milan, San Rafael, and some of the other communities. So you might brainstorm on that and say, okay, what is this all about? It may not be a meeting where they're going to be making decisions and going through all the mechanics of being a committee. You're just wanting to bring them together to get a sense of where this district is at and what we're facing, and getting some further feedback from them that might help us with, well, you basically would need to tell them, the purpose of this is to actually take all of your best thoughts together to help us formulate a strong plan of education based upon this. I don't see a principle here, but anyway, you end up having a group of 100, which would be crazy.
Well, I mean, easily.
So
we could get to
just
that.
be generous, but also be realistic.
It probably needs to be like a town hall meeting, Dr. Guy.
Could be something of that sort. So you might want to
And then what town do we have it in?
brainstorm.
Yeah.
Anyway, this,
And do we feed everybody?
There was
You know, they will come, that's right.
in the beat and on the Yazzie Martinez, and I don't know if anybody read it, but it talked about the state, you know, what they're doing. And that they're putting money into districts, but
But they really,
But
but they really aren't, right?
No.
I mean, that's what.
I don't know if
Yeah.
I've read that.
Are- So
Yeah.
as of yet, and,
Yeah.
and but we want them to,
Yes.
we want them to.
And the PEDs.
I didn't get to read it all.
Legislators. I mean, the PEDs are legislators.
Now that we have a new, Secretary of Interior, he lost us, you know, criminal. For that, like, the wrong window.
So he, did he go to union?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Who?
Dr. Romero.
To New Mexico State University.
Yeah.
He went,
Yes, I heard he was.
did you say, I thought he just said that he was thinking about it.
Finally resigned.
Oh, he's a finalist.
He's a finalist.
He didn't resign,
He resigned today.
so he must be close.
We
Can we take a quick
Offer?
break? I know.
We can take a quick break,
minutes,
and I
2
can
minutes.
probably knock this stuff out.
What's
Because
that?
I do have to leave.
I'll give you guys some homework. Would that work on the
We
RFP?
don't, this is a work session, we can,
We can
Yeah.
finish what we finish and not
Yeah.
finish it all,
Yeah.
right?
you can just tack on a little work session that makes me.
All right, quick break and then we'll come right back.
I'm good
That way
with
we can finish.
Ron was probably freezing to death.
Do we
I
need
know,
to-
poor thing.
Man, it's cold.
That's not bad.
It's cold here.
I thought-
When I walked into the bar, they were like, if you look up the wrong soul, she brought a jacket. I was drinking coffee in there.
You go into the class.
This is not for me.
So the other thing is out of New Mexico. I thought it was a federal bill.
No.
It came from Duty. They started it, they soon stayed in Mexico. and they-
But I think it's going up into the federal levels too.
All right.
What's lost in the way? Well, as the Supreme Court.
And that had a lot of impact on us getting, impact, state, state
Okay.
Okay, now,
We're good.
All right, we're back for a quick RFP process.
I think we can get through the next items real quick, and what we'll do is we'll just do kind of takeaways with these items. Item D is our RFP for board legal services. We do have to put out an RFP for board legal services. When we discussed it before, there was talk about, do we need legal counsel to talk about the RFP? Do we need, there may be certain things that we want addressed in the RFP. And so, what I would like to encourage is everyone take the copy from your binders, take it home, read through it, and if there's anything else that you want in an RFP, send me an email. Send me an email before our September 17th meeting. And that way we can kind of get an RFP together and get you guys an attorney hired. Because you guys need legal representation.
Well, right now, you do have,
And then
We do.
we do have legal services. So
We do.
And then MOU
and-
Washington rating.
I
And
know.
I had a talk with the auditor. The auditor was here last week and I had a really good talk with him and he said, you can open our RFP and you can accept all of the bids. And, as a board, you just need to make sure that you have that RFP in place. So you have legal services. So,
Okay,
Well, and one of the things that Manning did caution boards about, and it wasn't, anything but a broad caution, for all boards, is that when school districts are fielding RFPs, whether it's for, services being legal or construction or whatever the services may be, is that you do not add too many details and parameters, because that can actually result in a finding. Because if you are saying, okay, and the example he gave was for Xerox copy machines versus, Hewlett Packard or whatever the other, copy machines are. You can't be so specific in saying you want all copiers to have a 0.4-second first page spit out, because then you're being too brand specific. So he just cautioned that, make it more broad, and that it is, there is procurement law, and we need to be sure that we're adhering to what the law states.
We should have an RFP, sample RFP that we've used
this is a
Right.
sample.
prior, okay, yeah, because, we used that when we went off, the company at one time, the library came and then some of the board members wanted to go to, Lopez, Ortiz, and so they made it, and then we ended up paying because the experience may be more expensive, but they have really good every areas. Yeah.
So thank you, Mr. Reiner, for encouraging feedback from. the
yes,
board on
you,
that.
you guys email me before September 17th.
This is for a committee, or
Well,
we've never had a committee to do that, or we've always done it ourselves as a board.
let's talk about those when we get back together. There is that discussions of different components. So what you want is basically us to comment on any aspect that is of interest to us or.
Correct. Correct. If there's anything that you guys feel that you need.
All right.
And then, Mrs. Hunt Daly, don't get fired up yet. Career technical education has been a big push throughout the state since the pandemic. Schools are being encouraged to build school districts are being encouraged to build CTEC sites. They're being encouraged to graduate students with kind of like the early college high school movement. Now you have a movement where we want to graduate kids with certifications. So kids that have welding certifications, pre-vet certifications, all kinds of different career training and hands-on training. Mrs. Lightfoot and I both have a background in career technical education, and it's very cyclical. It goes away and comes back. You know, back in the 50s, everybody was being encouraged to go to beauty school or to go to barber school, you know, and so it goes away and it comes back. And so right now, the big thing is career technical education and CTECs, having a facility where kids can go get certifications. We have legislators that want to give our district money to have these programs. I've been working a lot on being in our classes. So like at Laguna Acoma, we have a mechatronics program. We have a broadcast program. At Grants High School, we have a broadcast program. We have a agriculture program. You guys have seen the agriculture students. We have welding. We have construction trades. At the middle school, we do programs called We Build It Better. And so there's a lot of CTE in our district. We are considering what does that look like and how do we get CTE programs. And so there is a lot of conversations going on. And so that is kind of, I emailed you all a couple weeks ago and told you that I've asked one of the directors to kind of step into a little bit of a different role. I need somebody who will kind of spearhead what certificate, and the CTE programs we offer need to be programs that are relevant to our community. So if we want our kids to be prepared to work at Sky City Casino, you know, they need to know how to run computers and networks and coding and, you know, and so, and, you know, if they're going to work at the hotel, they need training in hospitality and tourism. So, so I have asked one of the directors to work on that. So that's going on. We're trying to keep focused on TPE and keep the good stuff we offer at the good schools, you know, and make sure that it is relevant to what we need.
Testimony.
The last meeting I went to with the staff officer, what they're worried about is proposed move to establish a whole new campus, which means that they're going to take kids from Laguna Acoma, whose numbers are already low. They're going to take students, population from Grants High School and middle school. And so that reduces the funding for these schools. And that's one thing that they're not in favor of. Instead of reducing student populations at these other schools, they want to increase it. So they think that the CTEs should stay within the campuses so that will attract those students that go to San Diego school, that go to public schools. It'll attract them back to Laguna Acoma so that our numbers will go up. Otherwise, you create a whole new site, then we're going to lose numbers. And that's their major concern. And I'll tell you right now, there's also talking about starting their own tribally operated school. And I remember Mr. Jones said, let them take it, let's see if they can do a better job. And so that's where we're at. That's the discussion that's going on right now. And so they kind of tasked me to bring a governor from Acoma Council and ones from the Laguna Council and the Grant schools specifically at them, to be able to come together and see just if that's a feasible solution or and stay within the district or to pull out of it. it's not funded anymore, charter schools. Okay. But the traffic operating schools is a different avenue, and it takes a little bit longer, more than a charter school. So that's one of the avenues that they're exploring. So if that becomes true, then there'd be no reason to, well, I don't know if they need to lead a representative. I don't know. Yeah, that's okay.
I was gonna give a testimony.
Yes, sir.
One of my, well, one of Maryland's relatives is an HVAC guy. Not a college, an HVAC guy, but he's smart. So he is a well-paying job. And then I came across a Navajo woman this weekend. And her husband is an HVAC. And he's got a kind of, they work with corporations. And big time. Things like that. So in other words, there are avenues, even this nurse I was talking to, you know, she got her, she didn't go to college, but she went to nursing school, you know, through, which one they have in town. And,
See this?
well, you know, pharmacist, and now she's going to provide practical. They're registered, certain things. It's amazing.
Well, it's just in my family alone, not all of us that can, like, we have doctors, we have lawyers, we're in the health field, we're in healthcare, we're in education. And then we have one, another son of mine that didn't want that, nothing to do with education, and he got in electrical, and he probably makes more money than all of us.
Yeah, well, what is the name for her kid? Is in welding?
Yeah,
Small.
this is small.
Small, yeah, and, love it. All I'm saying is
But
that.
he didn't want to go to college, but we let him.
My first year here, Dr. Guy, we had a student that graduated and he went to Donna Ana Community College in Las Cruces and he went to the electrical lineman school.
Oh, yeah.
He was in school for 9 months and that kid makes more money than I do. And I'm so proud of him.
It's
just
amazing.
because he does such a good job.
My son he could have got scholarships in every sport that he wanted, and he went into.
Well,
To a whole.
all said and done,
That's what we've taught, what we've done.
Sure.
I wanted to just stand and weeks and become a
Surfer.
my parents, you know, did the opposite. They wanted me to talk.
President Lee, the last item is the school board
Yeah.
calendar. It's a living, breathing
Let's
document.
talk about that later.
And Lorraine, take it home with you. Take it
Yeah.
home with you. And I recommend that we adjourn this meeting.
I love it. Thank you for the recommendation.
I motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thank you. Mrs. Vanderbilt, roll call, please, quick.
Dr. Campbell?
Yes, I'll speak for Ron too. He said yes.
Ms. Daly?
Yes.
Mr. Lemieux? Mr. Ortiz?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Aye, motion carries. The board adjourned at 7:38. Yeah.
Thank you.
It would make it pretty inspirational.
Thank you.
There.